Heute habe ich einen ganz besonderen Gast, den ich schon lange persönlich kennenlernen wollte. Daniel Ilabaca. Daniel ist ein Pionier in der Parkour-Szene und hat diese Bewegungsform geprägt wie kaum ein anderer. Zudem ist er eine unglaubliche Inspiration und Vorbild für mich selbst und für meine eigene Bewegungsreise. Da Daniel ursprünglich aus England kommt, ist das Gespräch in Englisch aufgezeichnet, allerdings mit deutschen Untertiteln unterlegt. Die Übersetzung hat mich viele Stunden gekostet, aber dadurch hatte ich Zeit, viele der Aussagen noch einmal wirklich zu verinnerlichen. Das Gespräch ging so in die Tiefe, dass ich über viele Dinge noch lange nachgedacht habe. Es hat mich dazu gebracht, Bewegung und meine Herangehensweise an meine eigenen Bewegungseinheiten noch einmal neu zu denken. Auch wenn das Gespräch durch die Untertitel vielleicht etwas anspruchsvoller zu verfolgen ist, kann ich dir versichern, dass es den Mehraufwand auf jeden Fall wert ist. Für mich war es ein unglaublich aufschlussreiches Gespräch, das mich persönlich und auch auf meiner eigenen Bewegungsreise sehr viel weitergebracht hat. Also, hol dir einen Kaffee oder einen Tee und lass dich von unserem Gespräch inspirieren und berühren.
Parkour's been a great physical tool to help me navigate the physical world. But what I've come to realise as I've got older is there's also a world beyond the physical, and what you do in the physical directly impacts the non-physical. I've explored the deepest reaches of the physical world, and I've explored what people would consider like the furthest reach of physical achievement and stuff. And I've found that it's only scraping the surface of like a world that's even more profound than the one that we're actually seeing, tasting, touching. It's so much bigger than I ever could imagine. I developed this saying: the world you believe shapes the world you perceive. In other words, like the way you view reality shapes reality itself, right? I just fortunately had a mother that acknowledged that when I was moving I came to life, and when I was in school I didn't. And she had come to me personally and said, I'm going to give you a year out of school. You've got this year to find it what it is that you love doing. And if you don't, at the end of the year, if you haven't figured out what that is, then you have to finish your education. Funny enough, parkour was birthed out of an environment that was created to restrict and limit human movement. But it created the opposite effect. It created a burst of creativity and exploration, where people used a wall that was supposed to keep someone going in this direction became a way to go in another direction. Trying to figure out how do I navigate this situation enabled me to better understand the internal world, the internal struggles, the frustrations, the anger, the loss, the pain. It helped me to kind of, to understand love more, that love is more efficient than pain.
Today I have a very special guest for me, Daniel Ilabaca. Hi Daniel, I'm incredibly happy to have you here today. And for those who don't know you, you were and you still are one of the most influential parkour athletes. And you've shaped this discipline in so many ways and helped to bring it into the spotlight. And personally, you have also been a huge role model and source of inspiration for me. And which is why I'm so excited to sit down here with you for this conversation.
Awesome.
And what impresses me the most is when you move, there's a smoothness and elegance that very few others can match. So you have also constantly created new movements and in many ways reinvented yourself over and over again. And you have inspired not just me, but thousands of other athletes as well around the world. So I'm really excited to have you here today and looking forward to the talk with you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me in the call. It's been a long time since I've done any kind of interview stuff but yeah, I don't know, I think over this last months or whatever, I've kind of started to develop a curiosity for the movement world again. And so I suppose the timing of everything is kind of lining up, and yeah, I'm curious kind of where this interview will go and the things that we could openly discuss, and I'm also curious to see what comes from the conversation. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Great. So let's start with the first question. When you were a child, have you ever been really into movement? Have you ever been a child who was very moving a lot? And what was your first discipline you started with?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's I think I've just grown up presuming that most kids kind of do move, right? Again, my earliest memories is always climbing on something or exploring or my parents, with my two older brothers and my little brother, I was always getting lost because I was kind of in the middle, and they My younger brother had like a lot of physical issues growing up, so he took a lot of my mother's attention. So it just meant that I had this like tendency to drift off and wander and climb things, and next minute she'd find out I was on the side of a cliffside or something or whatever. I think it's always inherently been kind of in me to kind of explore and climb and play, and I wouldn't really say that it's anything more unusual. I think most kids kind of do tend to kind of have that inquisitiveness and explorative nature. So I feel like, I don't like to say that there's anything super unique to my upbringing, but like one thing that immediately stands out is that I have two older brothers, and I always wanted to do what they were doing. Back then, when there was no internet, you were forced to use your imagination and play with a piece of wood in the garden and make something with it or whatever. And my older brother was always just someone that was like actively making things and using his imagination, and it was very encouraging to me and stuff. So I was always inspired by my older brother, Chris. And I think like going back to my earliest memories, I remember they discovered rollerblading. It was back like in the early 90s. They discovered rollerblading via VHS tape. And so like we used to kind of religiously kind of watch that every day and get inspired. And my brothers would like pester my mum and dad for a pair of rollerblades. I would cry because I couldn't get a pair because I was too young. But I would always watch them do it. I was like so excited the first day that I received a pair of rollerblades. My brother, he crafted like a metal plate on the side of the rollerblades, and it enabled me to grind. So I'd get my dad's ladder in the garden. I'd take it off the wall. I'd put it on the floor. My brother would help me put it on an angle, and then I'd be at the age of 7 just trying to grind this ladder. Like just like every day going out, trying my hardest to grind this ladder, falling, getting up, doing it again. And so it was just always like wanting to do what my brothers were doing, really. I suppose that's where I became fixated on the idea of just wanting to kind of play and explore more. And I think it's just a fortunate set of circumstances that opened up the door to make that more of a thing that I would do. So
Would you say, how you described it, that every child has this urge to move if it just don't gets limited by its parents or its surroundings? Because I think in these days sometimes it's very hard for a child to move free because there are so many limitations in the society, in its surroundings. So it's hard to really explore the surroundings because of the anxiety of the parents and other people around them.
I think the same can be said about adults. I think for me personally, I feel like a lot of the theme of today, I suspect, will be about stimulus. And I think that, kids are more organically accessing it because the world is so big to them. I think as we get older, we kind of we allow what's been taught to us to shape how big the world is, and eventually it becomes very small. And I think when it becomes very small, we start to I think we start to kind of fall out of that momentous curiosity and a drive in the belief that there's more for us to discover, whereas kids just have a natural tendency to think and feel that way. When a child's born, they might be there physically, but they haven't quite arrived, And it's like as they grow, they develop, and then you start to see in their eyes like they've arrived, they're there now, But then when they're there, then it's like now they're proceeding beyond their physical body, and they're touching and they're looking and they're seeing and they're tasting and I think like it reaches a point where 5 or 6 or whatever, where kids are like asking loads of questions externally, and then they're really physical and like touching, climbing trees and da-da-da. I think it's just this really beautiful natural kind of process that develops, really. And obviously it's inherently within every child. I don't think it's just movement related. I think it's just it just reflects a lot physically, but it's an internal reflection of the state of mind, really. And then obviously parents teach their kids certain things. I think there's a social contract, right? Like the way that we behave, the way that we interact, and I think that's a good thing. I think it's good to have freedom within a framework, like a way of respecting people. I suppose it's like the natural development that a parent imposes on their children is how to socially interact. But within that, there seems to be, as we get older, that we're also very physically, we're very beautifully innocent in the way that we see the world. And then, we start physically expressing, and then we become very physical, even in our mindset, to the point where, and I don't mean like physical in terms of movement. I mean physical in terms of how we rely on the physical things that we see around us. We use our eyes and our voice and our taste and to make sense of everything, right? But it definitely feels like somewhere along the line we've kind of lost sight of something that was so organically accessed in the past. And I wouldn't say it's on every parent or it's on every individual that they're responsible for losing that thing. It just seems that the world that we live in has been so crafted to see things a certain way that it's sort of like, it's like, imagine like a plant growing, like it's just like cutting the head off the plant early on, and at that point people start to kind of settle for less, I guess, and then it's just, I don't know, maybe that's a bit too deep, I don't know, but like
It's perfect.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love it.
Yeah. So I feel like, that sense of curiosity, like my belief very strongly is that there is more than meets the eye. There's so much more going on than what we realize.
Can I ask you one question that really interests me? How did you manage to not lose this curiosity, this passion, like you described it right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard question to answer really without getting too kind of, I don't know, like into more of a religious topic, I suppose, because I feel like the framework of my thinking is based on a biblical principle. Like I believe the world is driven by narrative. I developed this saying: the world you believe shapes the world you perceive. I believe, or something like that. So it's like, in other words, like the way you view reality shapes reality itself, right? And so, yeah, like my kind of foundation has come from a biblical kind of outlook on things. The believing factor of like being created in God's image, being created, and to be a reflection of that glory, and we're all sons and daughters of God, sort of thing, and owning that, we're all children of God. And that, yeah, we've been given this kind of spirit to discern, but in the midst of all the craziness that's going on, this discerning spirit to kind of better navigate the circumstances that we're in. And obviously, there's a very kind of, I think it's a universally relatable thing, especially in the West, I feel. But you can use like words stimulus, momentum. I think they're very resonative things to those that maybe don't have a faith or don't believe in God or whatever. If you have the right lenses to be, when you're reading the scripture, you're able to read it and it makes more sense. What I mean by that is, like, for me, the scripture, like the person of Jesus, for example, it's all about momentum. The whole thing is about momentum. I often say that Jesus was the fastest man on the planet, but he walked everywhere. And again, even when you think of like the language of parkour, it sort of lends itself subconsciously to the Bible, in my opinion. It's about getting from A to B as efficiently as possible. So to say that is to assume we're not where we're supposed to be. We're trying to get somewhere, right? And then on top of that, it's pointing out the importance of efficiency. Well, it's not about there being many roads to God, or there's not about there being many ways up the mountain. The question is, what's the most efficient way? And so it's like efficiency plays a big part in that key philosophy of parkour, right? And for me, like, obviously I used to look at David and the Emakazi and those guys and stuff, and I had a great admiration for them. Later in life, I kind of questioned more deeply, and it brought me into this kind of awareness more of the nature of Christ and how he carried himself. And I realized I personally came to the conclusion that there hasn't been a faster man on the planet within the 3 years of his ministry before he was crucified or whatever. There hasn't been someone that has shook the world so strongly. And that for me is the stimulus. That's the curiosity that keeps it alive. It's like, I can go about the mundane daily life and I can do my job and just be in the world and making, money to stay alive and da-da-da. But deep down in me, there's this deeper sense of curiosity that, even though on the surface I've come to this conclusion that there is something profoundly powerful that took place on the cross that I don't understand. I say yes to it, but it's like there's this awareness. There's an ocean of deepness to the whole thing, and again that keeps that stimulation alive, really. So it's hard for me to answer that question without going into that topic. I don't think it's just like this special key that's like, yeah, if you just think this way, it'll just work out for you. It's like, I think a lot of it comes down to literally what you choose to believe actually shapes the world you perceive, right? It shapes the way you move through the world. And so that's become such a loud thing in my life, even when I'm not actively pursuing my faith-driven life, or I'm not actively pursuing it. I would describe it as the Holy Spirit. I'm always in conversation with God, even when I'm not. I could be in the shower, I could just be talking to my friends, whatever. I could be doing stuff, but I'm always aware of this internal voice, and it's always how I kind of discern my decisions, how I navigate the world that I'm in. It determines the things I say yes to and the things I say no to, and I'm constantly kind of not sizing myself up against it, but I'm constantly realizing that there's an invitation into more, and there's also the ability to settle for less.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Parkour's been a great physical tool to help me navigate the physical world. But what I've come to realize as I've got older is there's also a world beyond the physical, and what you do in the physical directly impacts, the non-physical. I've explored the deepest reaches of the physical world, and I've explored what people would consider like the furthest reach of physical achievement and stuff. And I've found that it's only scraping the surface of like a world that's even more profound than the one that we're actually seeing, tasting, touching. It's intertwined, it's intermingled, and so yeah, I find that like I went from being a kid that mastered the physical playground that I was in, only to discover there is a bigger playground that is for the mature. It's for the it's not for the faint-hearted. It's not, you know what I mean? It's so much bigger than I'd ever could imagine, and that keeps that spirit alive. That keeps that fire alive. That curiosity alive, the same way that it is in kids. Right? And so yeah, I suppose that would be my my answer to that question. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, no
So, as I now understand it for you, and I think I have similar access, and I think we are here, we got this body, so from a spiritual perspective, I think we are here on this world, and we got this body to discover, to express ourselves, to learn something about ourselves. And this physical being is not us, it's just a transport,
Vessel.
just a vessel, yeah, exactly, for this time on this earth, on this planet. And I think we got it to try out a few things and to see how far we can go, or how far we want to go. And then it shows the world inside of us, or it shapes the world inside of us, or the other way around, the world inside of us expresses or becomes our body, becomes our surroundings, like you said before, our reality.
Yeah.
And therefore, movement is one way for me to discover the world, to learn something about me, to learn something about the world. And I think because many people on this way, on this spiritual journey, let's say, or religious journey, just focus on the mental side, or the spiritual side, and the non-physical side. But I think both sides are very important
Yeah.
to get it together, and to develop on all levels, not just on the spiritual or religious side, not just on the physical side. And
Yeah.
today I observe two very extreme directions, or paths. So the one path is really physical, really getting stronger, getting faster, getting winning this competition, or being in front there. And the other path is just spirituality, religion. And I think we need to combine those both, because we are a physical being and we are a spiritual being, and therefore we need to integrate all those aspects to become a whole human being, and a whole. We are not just this physical body; we are a soul who are on this planet. That's my view.
It's interesting. The older I've got, the more I've realised that people that write stories, like, or people that direct movies, for example, because I work in the film industry. Not all movies, but some movies, right? Like Gladiator, for example, or like I use the example of Troy. Troy is a great example. Is the director's trying to portray a man that's somewhat transcendent, right? Like in the ancient time, they would have called him a god, right? Or like, you know, a demigod or whatever. But like, for example, take Achilles, for example, in the movie Troy. The way that Achilles kind of like approaches there's like this big, huge, strong man with a spear and he's taunting the other side. But the whole idea is that the whole point of the story is the director or the storyteller is trying to invite us into the physical experience, but to show us something transcendent within the vessel of the person, right? That is an invitation to believe again, I feel like that's why I've sort of become more fascinated about movies, specific movies, like over the recent years and stuff. I mean, you could go as far as to say that you are right, like there's either one extreme physical or the other side, which is just hyper spiritual. The two need to be carefully put together, and humans can discern when that happens, and I think that when people move, people fail to realize that movement is a language as well. The English language, or the way that German or whatever, the way that we communicate, it's founded based on the physical experience, while us at the same time being aware of an internal experience. But even the language is restricted because we know so little about the unseen aspect of life. Like, I mean, again, our eyes only see a very specific spectrum of light. There's infrared. We don't see infrared light. So that's proof that there's more to what we see, right? There's more going on to what we see. And we know very little about that playground and how to define it, and we have a tendency as humans to define things, to be, this is what it is, so that we categorize it, we put it in a box. But there's no denying there's obviously an area of exploration that where the English language breaks down, or the Germanic language breaks down, and we can no longer tangibly, and so like, that's, I suppose that's why it's important to point out that when we see people move, we're not just seeing physical movement, we're seeing the heart of the matter, like the picture on the back of your wall, right? You're seeing someone sat there, but there's also that what you're alluring to there is that there's the heart seems to be permeating and oozing out of their body, sort of thing. So it's like, I suppose it's the same, when people move. And again, coming back to what I was saying about stories, it's these people, these storytellers are trying to invite humanity into like believing in these things. People are so drawn to that story, and I feel it's because it's inherently in us. We know deep down that there's more to what meets the eye. We know that there's more to what we're actually seeing, tasting, touching. I think the storyteller is trying to encourage people to kind of like own their own story. You know what I mean? Like, your life is a story that you can participate, or you can kind of, and I think, just to own the story, to be courageous, to be believant, and like, so it's interesting.
Yeah. And let's get back to the physical part just for a little bit. I think, or what me always fascinated on parkour is that it's just the continuation of this childish exploration. So just I go out and play around, I explore my environment, I climb trees, I climb on a wall, I jump over a stone. So every child is doing this. But when we grow up, we lose it somehow. And that's what always fascinated me, because it's one of the most natural part of movement, or sort of movement you can imagine. Every native, all native people are doing it. And how do you perceive this, or how was your access to this, to parkour in general?
How did I get into parkour in general? Again, it's a culmination of a lot of different things. I think one huge pillar of a foundation would be my mother, right? Like, Like my mother, was the one that believed in God and stuff, and then I had this world within home, and these specific beliefs that I was taught, and then I went into school, and it was a whole broad array of different beliefs, but there was like an overarching theme, even though there was many options, there was like, no, this is how things are. So I did what any kid would do, is I tested both worlds to try and make sense of what was right, what was wrong. When I was like misbehaving or whatever in school, I got immediately labelled and told this is what I am. When I'd go home and put my mum through the same level of stress, she would refuse to see me for anything. She'd refuse to see me than anything less than loved and redeemed and forgiven, and like, so I was always just confronted by this person of Jesus, basically. So that baffled me for the longest time, really. She saw that whenever I physically moved, I came to life. And that whenever I was put in a classroom, I sort of kind of, that passion diminished. And it's not because there was, I'm not saying that education's bad. I think it's great. But I think there's a crucial thing that education gets wrong nowadays. And it's that as children are developing, the sense of self is more important than the things that you're trying to teach them. And I think we a lot of it comes from an industrial revolutionary mentality of like creating workers. And that's fine, but it's like there are some core things that have to be addressed first. Kids have to be able to, there needs to be a safe environment created, a freedom within a framework for them to explore and play under specific guidance. Obviously, some relative limitations, but enough to allow them to come to a conclusion of how, what the world is and how to make sense of it and the things that they're passionate about, the things that they want to do. So it's like, I just fortunately had a mother that acknowledged that when I was moving, I came to life, and when I was in school, I didn't. And so she decided to take action herself, and she had come to me personally and said, at the age of 14, I think it was, she was like, I'm going to give you a year out of school. You've got this year to find what it is that you love doing. And if you don't, at the end of the year, if you haven't figured out what that is, then you have to finish your education. And I was like, that sounds reasonable. Funny enough, it was within that year that I discovered capoeira. And I discovered, and then at the end of that year, I discovered parkour and stuff. And I just dived into it, And even though there was no clear direction, it just became so obvious that was like the thing that brought me to life. And it naturally led into like, I got invited to do like a stage show and a bunch of other stuff, and so it just one thing snowballed into the next. I did this Channel 4 documentary and stuff. It was like on young teens around Britain, and that was kind of my entry. Funny enough, the invitation started to kind of steer towards the film industry and stuff, and then I used to go to London and meet with people and train with people, and I was just riding this wave and momentum. I think if it wasn't for my mother's, rather than like just being like, allowing even the school to dictate my personality, because she would be pulled into meetings where they'd be like, your son is like this, your son is like that. She would refuse to acknowledge what the teachers would say. I had put her through some hard times, and I've asked her later in life, I was like, did you know what you were doing? She said, I had no idea what I was doing. But my faith in that God had a plan for your life and was the most important thing. And like, I didn't, she said that at times, like, I even brought her to the point of tears, but she said that like the only thing she could lean on was just the person of Jesus and enduring through whatever trials I was putting her through. And so, yeah, that's why I always describe it as being like confronted with Jesus. Every time I kind of went at my mum, not physically, I'm just saying like emotionally, I was confronted with, she was like protected within this person of Jesus, and I was just confronted with this the reality of this person, But that became the groundwork for like what opened up the door for me. Again, like the enduring nature. I don't want to put too much light on my mum, and I don't think my mum would want that either. She'd want me to point to Christ, obviously, but like her enduring nature created a window of opportunity for me to find the thing that I was passionate about. To add to that, I will say, like, when I saw the Yamakasi, I saw men jumping across rooftops, and that was a further encouragement, because it was like, I loved climbing trees, but I was told it'd never get me anywhere. But then I looked at these adults, and they were still doing the thing that I was told I should stop doing. That was also encouraging to see men doing that, you know.
I think that was a very brave move from your mom to put you out of school and just say to you, just give you a year off, just find out what you really love. And I think really in a perfect world, every child should have this opportunity to just try out, to find out, to see what's inside of him, and just yeah, discover what really drives this child, and really what moves you.
Yeah.
And I think very less children today have this opportunity, because we're, like you said before, we are so in this, yeah, in the system, caught up, and we just have to function. We just have to get our education, to get our examination, then get into the working process, and everything is so tight that we never have time to really look inside of us and see
Well,
what.
it's funny what you just said there. You said we never have time. It's funny because I feel like a lot of the theme of the way that life is structured right now is based on that very, like, thing. Like, we don't have time, you know. Like, and I think, like, even the construct that you're kind of talking about, this system of operation, it's all based on I wouldn't say strongly on financial gain, but that is a big driving force to a lot of it, you know, to a lot of it. And if you, the more I thought about money and stuff, the more I've realised it's like the more money you have, the more time you have to do the things you want to do. So it's like it's like this rat race of everyone trying to just get into a place where they can have more money, and then they have the time to do the things they want to do. And it's like, you know, again, I don't really want to come against that and say that's a bad thing. Like, you know, I think it's more about how some things that we have to kind of step back on and reflect and kind of observe and be like, okay, this isn't working. Environment plays a huge part of that. Funny enough, you know, parkour was birthed out of an environment that was created to restrict and limit human movement, but it created the opposite effect. It created a burst of creativity and exploration, where people used a wall that was supposed to keep someone going in this direction, became a way to go in another direction, you know.
And I think that this also fascinated me always on parkour as well, because it's a way of looking on life and on challenges in general. So everything is a challenge. It's not an obstacle, it's an obstacle you can overcome, and it's not something here to stop or to limit you. And this is exactly, I think, how we should go out, or every child is looking on life this way, because this is, I think, our natural way of thinking. And now I just want to go a little bit further. Are still considered from many parkour athletes as one of the most well-rounded parkour athletes for all the time, and you have achieved, yeah, a really high status. And what do you think brought you there? Because in parkour, as in every other extreme or fun sports, or new sports generation, there is no restricted training. There is no trainer who sets your training plans or your daily routine. So you just go out and move. So what do you think brought you to that point?
Oh, that's a good question. It's hard to say. I don't know. Obviously, I love to move. I love to express and stuff. And I think that parkour was a very. I was definitely aware that the reason why it was so worth investing a lot of time and energy into parkour is because it wasn't yet defined. You know, it wasn't yet a part of a system of operation. It was the unusual thing that, and therefore it was open for interpretation. You know, it didn't belong to a system that benefits it you know, from from the activity. Yeah, it was undefined, and therefore it was a place of limitless potential, and limitless ways of interpreting what it was. And I think that's why it was worth diving into more, I suppose. I've often used the example, if I was like born today and I saw parkour, I probably wouldn't be interested, and it probably wouldn't be an activity I'd want to do. And it's because the environment was very different. I can't profess to be the owner of this experience. It's like I was just born at the time where it was like a movement was birthed. I mean, it's been around for thousands of years, it's the way that humans have moved through the world. But in a world where the internet was now, a real thing, it was the first interpretation of like this way of moving. It represents, in the limelight of things, it represents something very physical and something I'm not really that interested in.
What was it? What attracted you back then, and what is it? What wouldn't attract you today?
So back then, there was just this mystery about it. There was a mystery that came along with the movement, and it was like it was trying to make sense of why now, like why has it come now? And it was like, I don't know, like I think I've always been more curious about people than movement. I mean, I grew up in a Christian household, so like we used to be a part of a church. We'd always go away on camping trips with like other members in the church, and I'd have like aunties and uncles that weren't directly blood related, and then I'd go into school and I'd be talking with friends about like the relationships that I have, and then I'd quickly find out that they barely even speak to their own cousins. I'm like, wow, that's really strange. So I grew up realizing that like the community is such a strong thing to the collective experience, right? And so when I kind of started moving in this way, I met like-minded people that were all from different walks of life. Some of them were really unusual. Some of them were very, everyone was just the most unusual mixed bag of people. And there was a common sharing in the movement, like in the spirit of the movement, there was this common sharing. But it was just still open for interpretation. It was open to discover and to explore. And I don't really feel like it ever met its target. I don't think it ever reached the mark that it was intended to reach. I feel like it came into the world at that time, and it was like it was a invitation to use this thing to bring about something more profound. I think what I mean is like it's all about social environments, the conditioned environments that we're so familiar with. There's again the stories we watch them in the movies. It's always this invitation into a new environment, a new way of interpreting the world. And I believe parkour was an invitation to see the world in a new way that would later shape the world as a collective experience, right? But at the same time, as things were progressing, as the movement became more mainstream, I started to realize the moment it caught the attention of those that weren't paying attention at first, you would start to see the reinterpretation of what it was, right? It was interpreting itself. It was, and then it was almost like an outside force said, what about this? Look in this direction. And then it was like, and then people started going, and then it started to become more and more and more, and now it's like, it's this thing, Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Yeah. When you went out moving, what was your biggest inspiration? Like you said before, you were always very interested in people or in the connections. Was it having a good time with friends, or was it?
No, there was always, I think some people don't like to admit it. Some people are kind of comfortable to talk about it and stuff, but there is like a mutual shared energy of some sort in the space. I don't like to use the word energy because it's quite new agey or whatever, but like there was a mutual awareness that there was something beyond ourselves, right? Even just the other day, like I met up with a few guys and stuff. I won't name names, but we did some exploration together, and it was like there's something that grants you access to a space. You can force your way into it and steal and take from it or whatever. And then there's an organic way of accessing it, but at the same time you can't abuse it. You can't, it's like you have to respect it because it determines the overall outcome. Especially for the person that's like the main focus, whatever challenge they're overcoming. It's like, I know this probably sounds a bit cryptic, but it's like I feel like Yeah, it's hinting on there being something more profound going on, but I was always just fixated by that very thing. You know, there were times where I was granted access to do things, and then there was times where I would be looking at something I wanted to do, and then I was met with an internal resistance. I'm willing to talk to anyone more deeply about this. My belief is that fear isn't a bad thing that you try and get rid of. It's your heart's compass and way, and it's your heart's way of getting you to question whether it's worth your all. Like, whatever it is you're wanting to do, is it worth your all? And if it isn't, to be able to let it go, and have a respect that for whatever that thing is that doesn't grant you access, right? And I found that more often than not, by letting it go, it would come back to you, and it would, you'd be granted access. And so I feel like there was a mutual, back in the days, there were definitely transcendent moments, in London when we used to train together with a key group of people and stuff. There's obviously the broad array of mixed bag of people, but every now and again there was just like these collective of minds, and it was like there was just this hidden language. You would communicate without communicating. You knew what someone was going to do before they did it. There was a transcendent aspect of what was going on. It wasn't just physical movement. It was a oneness of mind. It really was. And I think for me that was more fixed. That was something I was way more curious about than the movement that I was actually doing. Everything physical I've ever done has only just been the whatever, at the end. But there was stuff happening there that was like way more stimulating than just the movement, the end result.
Did you go out and train by yourself as well, or
I'd do both. Yeah, I'd do both. I'd train by myself. I'd spend a lot of time sitting on rooftops pondering life. I was probably one of the first people in my village moving the way that I was moving, so I was definitely alone at times. Alone, but not alone, But yeah, I also equally love the moving around people. Yeah, I also found that words have a direct effect on your overall physical experience. There's a way of moving, but there's a way of communicating that opens up the space to a greater level of physical moving. And there was a direct correlation that made me realize that there's just as much power and gravity in the way that we communicate as there is in the way that we physically express, and it both lends itself to what I was saying. Either the words give permission to a greater level of freedom, or they don't. And again, it's funny, there's a scriptural verse that says life and death resides on the tongue. So it's, I have that in a very concrete, scientific, confirming way from my scientific experiments through movement and interaction and communication with people. My whole life has been a huge science experiment, right? Again, gravity plays a part, momentum, timing, like all of it is quantum physics. It's all just interlinked, intention, purpose, reason, choices, all of these, they're all intermingled, and it all plays a role in the level in which you experience life, right?
How I perceive this, it's always been a big mental motivation or philosophical motivation as well. So you were driven by this mindset, this community, this urge to discover, to find new ways to express yourself. And then on the other hand, you have very high acrobatic skills as well. How did you train those? And you invented new tricks as well, like the congainer or other tricks. So how did you come up with those, and how did you train them?
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say, man. I don't know if this answers the question, but Alex Honnold climbed El Capitan, the first one to do it, right? With no ropes and stuff. It could have been anyone. It just so happened to be him, but he also can't own it as though he's the first. It's like, I mean by that, he is the first physically, but the environment he was granted access to, and it could have been anyone, right? But he was given that space to access those things, and he also obviously has an underlying awareness that there's something more profound going on. Maybe he wouldn't want to kind of point it out or admit it. I don't know the guy personally, so I feel maybe the same was for me. I can't really own the movement that I've done and said I was the first or whatever, or that I got this because I did this and this. a lot of the way I describe things is like in a way that people can kind of relate to. It's just I suppose life happens in waves, right? And it's just about how you set yourself up in the water, And it's like, I guess I was more curious about rather than just riding the wave, I was more curious about like how to align myself for the next wave, right? So it's like, and it's like the humbling factor of life is that the wave always crashes against the shore, and if you ride it too long, you'll crash against the shore with it, and then it'll take you just as long to wade back out into the water to get ready for the next one. By that point, you've missed 2 waves. What you find out with older people is that like when they've been tossed by the waves long enough, they start to learn the way that things work, right? So they ride the wave, but while it's still midway through, they get off and they align themselves with the next kind of,
I see.
My journey was just spent acknowledging that like it's more important to, yes, you can experience the wave, but knowing when to get off. And as a result of that, I feel like that kind of maybe played a small part in freeing me up to discover things more, or move in a specific way. I don't know. It's a hard question to answer. Right?
I just want to try to get this a little bit more on the physical side as well.
Okay. Yeah.
Had you access to a gym, and how did you train these moves? Did you have someone who taught you the acrobatic basics, or did you learn everything by yourself?
I learned everything by myself. I mean, I came from a generation before YouTube, right? So I still remember dial-up internet when it used to sit there for about an hour before your internet started up. And then like there was a website called bilang.com I was just talking to.
Yeah, I remember this one.
Yeah. So I was just talking to a guy called Travis Verkey the other day. He was here in Switzerland, and we were talking about exactly that. And it was just this place for like martial arts, but it was like everything from capoeira, wushu, like everything. And there was no real parkour back then, but whatever. But like, so yeah, you would have to read the title of a video before you could even know what it was, and then you'd be sitting there for about 2 hours. At least we were sitting there for 2 hours to download like a 15-second clip or something.
Yeah, you had to download every video because there no streaming existed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so you put them in this little file, all these little videos, but you'd never know what you're gonna get. It was like a lucky draw sort of thing. So we only had like stuff like that to go off, and I think so. Like everything was like discovering the 2-step wall flip for the first time. Never seen anyone do that. We were having this issue in a class that we created this little. We used to go to the gym hall with the judo mats, and one of the guys used to do this wall flip, and he would like nearly hit his head on the wall. And my brother Chris, who didn't even move, he was like, "What if you like put your opposite foot on first, jump up, and then put your good foot on and flip back? Maybe that'll work." I was like, that makes so much sense. I'll give that a go. And then I was like, to my shock, I was like, wow, that's incredible. It's amazing. So we were very much kind of in that state of like that mindset of just like discovering, kind of playing. And so I feel like that was just a continuation, even to the point, long after YouTube. In my mind, there was no such thing as like, oh wow, he just did a double back. Back then, for me, it was just, oh, that's just another rotation. It's not like it was never idolized. It was never like, that's a double back, it's better than a single back. It was just like, oh wow, he did another rotation, interesting. So there was also an aspect at the age of like 16, 17, where it was like the world was saying this is amazing, but I was still coming from this angle of like just discovering, right? And it was so it was a battle to try and push out those voices and just see it for what it is. It's just another rotation, and discover it. Just learning how to drown out the noise was a big part. But like, yes, for the con gainer, it was exactly that. I was just at a chapter in my life where things aligned properly. I actively learned to shut out the voices, and I just spent time discovering. But no, I'd never done stuff in a gym. I'd done stuff like on a, we did go to parkour gymnastics actually later on. But like, yeah, we had like crash mats and stuff, I think I was trying it off the car bonnet, the front of my dad's car landing on my back and stuff. And I was like, well, technically, if I just take that a little bit higher, with the way that I'm tucking in right now, I'm pretty sure I could get around. And so, yeah, I just did. And that's kind of how that movement, I suppose. I wouldn't say it was discovered, because I learned later on, or I saw later on, that like some gymnast guy did it on a vault box back in the 80s or something. But I'd never seen that, so technically in my mind it was a new discovery. But I also read the words beyond definition afterwards, after the video, beyond definition. I think for the longest times people thought that was me just being really stuck up and stuff, but like I was actually just trying to cryptically point out that when you think outside of a defined world, you start to discover things that the world hasn't defined, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for me at least, it always was a big part of this generation, the journey, so that you really made these experiences by yourself. Today you just go on YouTube, type in every movement you want to learn, and you find thousands of tutorials, and you just follow those steps. Back then you had to find out every step by yourself, and you learn so many things about your body, about yourself. And of course, today you can learn every move a lot faster because you have access to all this information. But I think the journey is not the same.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting because like it was proven that those that rely on Google or ChatGPT or whatever for answers, it's having a direct physiological effect on the ability to remember. And it's actually like speeding up the whole thing of Alzheimer's and stuff like this. That's what I heard. I think what's more important is learning to make is choosing to fall in the circumstances of your life, as long as you've got a heart that's bent on learning and discovering. And I feel nothing beats the real practicality of just throwing yourself into a scenario. I think that's what's really cool about kids, is that like they don't really care what people think of them as well. They'll sit there and just bang a piano. But it's those kids that later become professional piano players, right? And I've often said what prevents adults from having the same ability to learn as quick. Obviously they might say there's a scientific element behind it, but I border on believing something more profound than that. And I believe that like it's all about the choices you make that create the restrictions you experience. And anyone can become a master piano player. It's just as long as you're okay with sounding shit. It's like you've got to be okay with not really caring what people think of you. If you really are passionate about something, then you've got to be willing to like sound or look crap.
I think it was Bruce Lee who said, you really become free when you don't care what other people think.
Really?
Yeah. And I think it's exactly that, because otherwise we always try to fulfill the expectations of others, or try to do a move you have seen somewhere, or a move which scores high, and then I think it's always the outside who is.
It is interesting, because the world we live in today, a lot of people move for validation, right? They want to be validated for their achievements, right? And that somewhat can come from a heart of poverty, sadly. I mean, that's just the reality of things. The thing is, like, even back in the day, like, for me, moving around people, it was the curiosity of how people engaged with what they were seeing, even in a negative sense, whether it was being confronted by the police. I was more curious about the whole aspect of collective experience and how the movement triggered certain things. I'm not saying that the people that are moving for validation these days should know better, because I think a lot of that just comes from the lack of there being someone that represents what freedom actually is, right? Like, so I don't want to judge too much into that area or whatever, but it's yeah.
That's another topic I wanted to dive into a little bit, because you have never participated in any competition, like Art of Motion or something like that. So what are your thoughts about competitions in the parkour world, or competitions in general?
Yeah, I don't think competition's bad. I think what's bad is that people interpret it the wrong way when they see it. I think like it's good that friends can kind of size themselves up. It's all part of learning and developing. I think if people get emotional about losing and winning, that's when things need to be addressed and things need to be figured out. Because You know, that I feel we're relying too hard on physical achievement to determine whether we're happy or not. So there's definitely a factor there that's not cool. But at the same time, if you're gonna broadcast that to people that have no association, no understanding of the holistic aspect of why we're moving and what we're doing together, you're actually, it creates the opposite effect. It kind of inflates the idea of the importance of a winner, you know, and it's like, I don't think it's wrong to have like a winning mentality. That I'm not saying everyone's a winner like either. I just feel like, you know, for example, I've been, you know, in environments like that, but it's when, again, look at Bruce Lee's probably an example, to be honest. You know, like he entered into a competition, right? Like because they were like they didn't want to accept his teachings in LA, to the best of my knowledge, right? So they got him to come in and fight against, you know, their best or whatever. But he specifically asked that no cameras be rolling, and so even he realizes that like you can't abuse, there is something more profound going on, and you've got to learn to respect that. And there's more to it than what I can describe, but like, you know, the love of money, even if it's not the people participating, maybe they just want affirmation, you know, to be seen, to be accepted. But I feel like the minds behind those that develop competition border on a mind of poverty, so to speak. And even them, you know, they can be susceptible to the influence of the environment that's been created, right? It's hard to say without sounding like I'm judging the people creating the competition, and I'm judging the athletes performing. I have this belief there's something more nefarious going on, you know, somewhere else. I don't like the idea of sitting in a coliseum and watching people fight lions. It's just not for me. And that goes not just for parkour. That goes. I'm not a huge fan of football. I love football in an interactive sense. Like I'll be down to play it, but I'm not a fan of the arena. Any arena for that matter, just not a fan at all. Even the arena of politics, you know, I'm not a fan of the arena of politics either. You know.
Modern gladiators.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And
Modern gladiators, yeah, exactly.
I don't want to judge anybody as well, but what I see or what I perceive is that in competition, who sets the rules and who say, or who can say this
I,
move is better
yeah.
than that
I'll,
one or scored higher.
I'll put it down to this. I'll try and make it very simple for the audience as well. I personally believe there's a mind of Christ, right? Like the very Western world, whether we believe it or not, right? Even for yourself, whether you believe in Jesus or not, it's irrelevant. The very framework of your thinking is based on biblical principle, based on the nation that you grew up in. So it's like there is a Christ mindset, and then there is a hostile mind, and I feel like that's what the reality of what we're experiencing is like. There is a mind that brings freedom and freedom to the fullness, and then there is a hostile mindset that is aimed at stealing, killing, and destroying. And I feel like, you know, that shapes the world we experience. You know, take it however you want and explore it, you know. But I really feel if you don't want to beat around the bush and you want to be straightforward with it, I believe there is like a greater level of freedom to experience beyond what we can imagine. It's even described in scriptures as Eden, right? But then there's a mind at work to destroy the idea of Eden, to destroy, you know. And I think in the world that we live in today, it just requires a greater level of wisdom, because all of us are watching. Everyone is watching what's happening, and we're all waiting. It feels like it's a big waiting game, because not one of us feels like we can solve the problem that we see. And I think that's a lie as well. I feel like what's most important is just the integrity of and the decisions that we make on a daily basis, without even, you know, obviously, even the idea of being pulled into a space of judging a situation. I feel it just requires a greater level of wisdom, you know.
So what I just wanted to point out a little bit is that I think once you have set the rules and once you have set these definitions, everything goes toward this specification. So you become very specific, and it doesn't matter if it's sports or business as well. So I think it's in some way it kills creativity because you just try to fulfill these expectations or to score as high as possible,
Yeah.
and I think the spirit gets lost. And sometimes when I see you moving, it has something special. So it's not if you make a double backflip or a congainer or if you just make a lazy vault, it's how you make it, not what you make. It's the quality of the movement. And then you can see, for me at least, so I see a competition line. So let's just stay in parkour for a moment. And you see the highest competition line in a competition, and it's just not this. It doesn't has the spirit. There are a few
I
very
suppose, yeah,
high level tricks, but it's not that this the same.
I suppose that's what that's kind of what I was getting at earlier as well. By the movie Gladiator, the director, the storyteller is trying to show the contrast difference. There are two men about to enter into an arena, but they're both just men, but one's posture is very different than the other posture. You can look at the man and you can see that he's coming back. He's not, his end is not in the arena, he's coming out of that arena. And then you see a guy standing next to him, and he's like, he's pissed himself in the movie, right? It's like he's peed himself, and that's his end. So there's like, the whole point is like whoever's telling the story is trying to show that we can actively carry something. We can either be in the world and just be completely physical, devoid, as you said, of the spirit aspect of it. In the ancient times, funny enough, they acknowledged the spiritual side combined with the physical. You know, sometimes in a very gruesome way. I think that's what the Colosseum was all about. It was wanting to see the transcendent moments in the face of death, and death was a very real thing. I don't think it's any different today. I think it's the death of a person, though they're still alive. It's like people's lives are just put on the line. Like, you might have lost a competition, but what you don't realize is like that's affecting the very heart of that individual. They might not physically die, but you are, it's like, it really is like we are killing each other in that respect. You know what I mean? Even the way we define what greatness is, we're also killing the one that's been defined as great. It's like, and as you said, it's like there has to be this perfect synergy of like, even what you do in secret, I suppose, like the way you carry yourself through your life, every decision you make. I'm speaking myself separate from myself, like you're describing me in the way that I've moved, like I carried something. I can only really put that down to like, just again, how I drew close in my walk to God, sort of thing. And so it's like, and I can't really open it up, but yeah, I mean, just Maximus. Maximus is a great example. Like we were invited to see the decisions, how he acts in the prison cell, how he acts when he's being persecuted, how he acts on the battlefield. It's like it all accumulates to this beautiful end. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think like, yes, I think that the whole point of that story is just showing how posture is such an important thing. And you can see that in the way that people carry themselves. Some people carry something quite profound, and that kind of, I suppose, that reflects in the way that they move, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you can put that on every aspect of life. It's not about what you do, it's about how you do it. And if you really give your whole intention into it, or if you really do it with passion, with love, and it doesn't matter how good you are, or in not good, or how on which level you move. It's just the important thing is that you move on your level, but with passion, and feel what your body is doing. I think many people are moving but aren't feeling anything.
Sure. Yeah, I think that would be a very important thing to point out to your audience, is that like, it should be an inspiration after this conversation to be curious about how you can use movement to learn more about how society functions, how you are perceived in society, maybe the relationships at home. Like, like there's a playground, and like movement, to some degree, movement for me was like a meditative praying state. It's like I would have these internal struggles, and I would go out and I'd move physically, and these physical obstacles were just a manifestation of the internal struggles. It just so happened to be the representation. And so trying to figure out how do I navigate this situation enabled me to better understand the internal world, the internal struggles, the frustrations, the anger, the loss, the pain, all these. It helped me to kind of, to understand love more, that love is more efficient than pain. I'd just steal from this real quick, but when Jesus says turn the other cheek, it's not because it's the humble thing to do. No, it's because it's the most efficient thing to do to set you up for greater freedom. Because when you retaliate to someone, you entangle yourself in their mess and you restrict your own ability to be efficient in life. So it makes sense to endure a punch, to receive it and to love that person, because that's actively more efficient than actually hating the person, or to retaliate in anger, or to point at them saying you're the problem. Do you know what I mean? And that can be said on a global scale, even politically. But and again, movement is a great tool that equips you to better understand the day-to-day, the things we all relate to: loss, pain, suffering, happiness, joy. It's like we all want more joy, we all want more happiness, we all want more love in our life, right? And for some it's easier to access, for others it requires a greater level of endurance, it requires a greater level of perseverance. And I think I would want to encourage anyone listening that movement helped me to kind of make those experiences a tangible thing in front of me that I could assess, make sense of, and overcome, while at the same time battling with this voice that would say to me, you have to be better, you need to be stronger. It's like that's not true. It's like, it's like I am worthy, I am loved, I am forgiven, I'm redeemed, I am whole. And I'm owning that whilst I'm exploring these movements. Even the temptation of go on, be this person, or you are great. You are, in the sense of in the eyes of the world. It's like, do this because you deserve it. Because it's like you're just constantly warring against all these different voices. But movement is a way of just drowning out the voices and just focusing on one thing at a time. So it's definitely, as you said earlier on, it's definitely important to be, yes, discovering the world in a very unseen, spiritually, there's a weird mix of a lot of things going on that I'm sure we can all relate to. Even, again, I keep coming back politically because it's very prevalent right now, that everyone's aware that there's a weird shift, there's just this weird thing going on, we're all just watching and waiting. It's like, there's an awareness that there's something really profound going on, and then we're like, well, where do we fit in it, And then that's when the practical side comes in, going out and being physical into your day, whether it's just overcoming a wall, whatever. It's like all of it's just helping you navigate the mess of the mind, and how to, again, like you said, it's important to have those two worlds come together. So, yeah.
Thank you. So I think that closes the circle pretty well. And I just want to ask you one last question. What would you suggest people who really have a hard time coming to move or getting their body into movement in general?
Yeah, I feel like it's funny, isn't it? Because I feel like I find that kind of where I'm at right now. Where I'm at right now is that I acknowledge that my stimulus to want to move, it's my stimulus to move in parkour has not been there for a long time. And I do often wonder, if that stimulus to move will come back, right? Yeah, sometimes it's acknowledging that, for example, if I have no stimulation to want to move on bars because I've lost so much arm strength. I've never experienced this before. I've gone from being an athlete for so many years that just moved so much, and my body had to submit to that mindset and become stronger physically. And then there was a period where I just had no stimulation to do it. I came away from it. And now my body is physically unable to do the things that, even if I tried to start moving again, it's harder to get stimulated because my body isn't where my mind wants to be, right? Where my mind is, it's like, I'm going to swing, like my body can't do it. So I feel like for some people, maybe it's like dietary, you've lived your life and you're kind of just plodding along and you're just eating food, maybe you're overweight, you know what I mean? And I think it's just like, it's a matter of just owning it, Like, I'm not upset that I can't swing on a bar for very long. I'm owning the reality that these are the choices that I made. Like, my body is submitted to my body, to my mind, to my heart, and it's physically weak. So I'm owning it, I'm weak, and this is a new experience, I've never been weak physically before. This is a great experience, So I'm on another side, So it's like, just own the reality of where you are. And sometimes it just requires, like, if you want to move, then own the reality that it will require a greater level of perseverance, endurance. You're going to have to just go through the hardship. You're going to have to just hate it and literally just push through it. You know what I mean? And just own it. Don't be like, I'm not where I want to be. You be like, no, this is exactly what it is. And sometimes you've just got to beat the body into submission, And so just own it. Yeah, that's what I would say. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Daniel. It was really a great talk. I think we covered a lot of topics, and I really love to dive into different areas because I think it's so much more. Movement isn't just physical. Movement is everything, and the whole
Yeah,
world
it's all you can move and be just completely devoid of mind. Like, fair enough, great, good on you. And I think we all should be curious about it, and we are all It's not looking at parkour as though it's the key. Like, everything we're talking about right now is relatable universally. That's why we watch movies and we're looking at people that represent something of both physical and spiritual. It's like, it's all inherently within us, and I think we all, But at the same time, I feel like another thing worth pointing out is that it's all good doing that by yourself, but we're not made to do these things alone. We're made for one another. We're made for interaction. So if you don't feel like you're even got people around you that are, then go discover them. There's just acknowledge the fact that there are people like you in the world who are equally trying to go, you know what, yeah, boom, and find those people, interact with them, and so I think community is a huge part of that. People is a huge part of that. I think we're not supposed to do things alone, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, we are social beings.
Yeah.
I think from the neurological part, we know there are two core things we need, and this is connection, or the feeling of being connected to somebody, someone, especially when we are a child, we are connected to our parents, to our mother, and then the second thing is growth, so that we discover, or that we can grow without losing this connection. And I think that's the whole life is
Yeah, I'll say one
trying
more thing. I'll say one more thing. The world is hostile to the idea of family. The mind that I was talking about earlier, the hostile mind, right? It's hostile to family, and it's hostile to the idea of community. And I think if we're looking at the world right now and we're trying to assess how do we get out the mess that we're in, then we should be hell-bent on being a community-driven people and a family-driven people. That is the most important thing. I acknowledge that most young people that I've come across these days that say they don't want to have kids, I've come to realize later, it's not that they don't want to have kids, it's that they can't see the world that they're living in right now, a world that they can bring kids into. And it's very true. The world is not complementary to family. Family is almost a reflection of a divine, in my opinion. It's almost like a rebellion. Not a rebellion. It's like a declaration of defiance against this hostility. To be able to have kids, to be able to be in marriage. It's saying, despite the circumstances, we are owning, we're stepping into this covenant, we're stepping into this relationship, we're bringing life into the world. It's like looking at a desert wasteland and seeing someone, opening a hole and putting a seed in. that's the hope. That's the thing we ought to all be driven by is family and community. And but I also feel like we have to kick ourselves into a new gear. The environments we live in, the cities we live in, are not designed for family. I see parents just constantly micromanaging their kids, running after their kids while they're playing, yet there's no space for their parents to play and to be inspired and to be brought to life. It's like, there's the little box, the playground the kids can go in. Adults have to walk this way. Like, we have to reimagine the way that we do society, the way that we interact in physical environment. It's key. Family is key. Community is key. So, I encourage everyone listening. Honestly, it's family is a beautiful thing, and I encourage young people to believe again that the future is bright, and that there will be environments in the future where families can thrive, and that people can grow together and stuff. So yeah.
Thank you. I think that was a very important message as well. And there are many good inspirational thoughts in this talk. So I have to think a lot about it by myself, and I think the listeners or viewers will have to think a little bit about it as well. So I think it was a pretty good conversation, and I have to thank you very much, Daniel, that you took your time. And yeah, maybe we can talk again one day, and wish you all the best for your next projects and for your own journey and movement as well. And what we didn't cover is your movie career or your movie part, but maybe that's a
Sure.
object for another talk.
Yeah, not a problem. Yeah, sounds good.
So thank you very much, and have a nice day.
Yeah, you too, man. Bless you. Thanks for getting me in the chat. I'm happy to be able to talk with you and stuff. And yeah, I hope, given the circumstances that we're in, that the audiences are encouraged and inspired to kind of, yeah, we're all in this together. So yeah, thank you for getting me into the call, and yeah, appreciate it, man. Really, really cool.